Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vought, good to see you. Congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for being willing to do this job again. You did a great job the first time around. I look forward to seeing you back in this office. Let me just ask you, one of the important functions of OMB is the role that it plays in managing procurement through the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. Would you agree with me that it is a problem? And by the way, I think 1 out of every 10 taxpayer dollars goes to federal contractors. So that's a lot of money. That's a big part of our budget. Would you agree with me that it's a problem when we are sending federal contracting dollars to entities, firms, especially consulting firms, that are simultaneously taking money from and doing business with our most lethal opponents, like China, for example? I mean, doesn't that strike you as a little strange?
That is concerning, yes, Senator.
Here's an example, prime example of this kind of behavior. McKinsey, the consulting firm. So McKinsey got, in the last year for which we had full numbers available, over $851 million worth of consulting work. They had 90 prime contracts with DOD. They got $98 million in contracts from the Army, $132 million from the Air Force, $37 million from the Navy. I think they advised on the F-35 fighter jet program and the Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center. At the same time, they had 1,000 employees in China. They were doing business directly with the Chinese government, and they advised Chinese state-owned enterprises that have now been blacklisted by our own military. Now, my view is that if they want to do business with China, I don't recommend it, but I suppose it's fine so long as it's not illegal. But I don't think they should simultaneously be getting hundreds of millions, approaching $1 billion in contracts, federal contracts, military contracts from our own government. Here's my question for you. You're going to have a lot of influence in this process through the procurement rules and process. Will you be an advocate for protecting American taxpayer dollars in this contracting process where hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year? Will you be an advocate for protecting that and making sure it's not going to entities who are effectively double dealing and advising our enemies at the same time?
What's up, Patriots? Welcome back to America First, the channel that puts American interests first, always. If you're tired of the establishment selling out our country while enriching themselves and their cronies, you've come to the right place. Make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe with notifications on, because we're bringing you the truth the mainstream media won't tell you. Today, we're diving into some absolutely explosive testimony from a Senate confirmation hearing that exposes everything wrong with how our government has been operating. This is exactly the kind of deep state corruption that President Trump has been fighting against, and why we need fighters like Senator Josh Hawley asking the tough questions that nobody else will ask.
Absolutely. I'm very excited, if confirmed, getting back to being able to work with OFPP, getting a handle on the guidance that we're giving government-wide as part of the FAR Council, and to really look at what are the regulations that are in place and how can we get them better.
Great. That's great. That's fantastic. Give me a sense, just while still on the procurement topic, how you might ensure that procurement policies prioritize American-made goods and services, particularly in industries that are vital to our national security. And I just think about our experience in COVID, and you were there for the beginning, the onset of the pandemic, and when we learned that, my gosh, we couldn't, the most basic medical supplies we're importing from overseas. Our medical supply chains are so compromised in so many ways. So give me a sense, have you given some thought to how the procurement process might be used to safeguard those critical supply chains and prioritize American manufacturers?
Yeah, I think clear leadership from the director to make sure that a viewpoint from the president is implemented at the level of policy that the OFPP is reviewing. A lot of times in the management functions at OMB, they're kind of on autopilot with regard to the clear direction of the president, and using the president's management tools and his agenda to be able to drive that policy across the federal government is something that we fully intend to do, and to do it robustly.
Very good. Let me shift gears just a little bit, but still thinking about federal regulations. Through OIRA, you have a lot of influence, thankfully, on the regulatory landscape and environment. I asked your predecessor in this role, the Biden administration nominee, if she would commit to the Hyde Amendment and the principle that we should not be using federal taxpayer dollars to promote abortions, which has been a bipartisan commitment, as you well know, for decades. She wouldn't commit to that. And indeed, as you know, the Biden administration pretty promptly walked back their commitment to it and has been essentially violating the law, because it is the law. They've been violating it for years now. Let me just ask you, when it comes to the Hyde Amendment, which is the law of the land, will you work to ensure that all of our rules and regulations, everything that comes across your desk, is in full compliance with the Hyde Amendment, and we are not spending federal taxpayer dollars to promote abortion in any way?
As I've said, Senator, we will abide by all laws on the books.
Very good. Let me ask you just a couple more things, and when it comes to the policies of life, because again, you're going to have a lot of influence over the regulatory environment. Would you agree that federal funding for family planning through Title X, through that grant program, should not include federal funding for abortion providers?
Again, the president has made his views on abortion really clear throughout the campaign. I'm not going to get ahead of the president with regard to the budget process. We have submitted budgets in years past that give the Senate a sense of how he would budget, but I'm not going to get ahead of the president on that.
But let me ask you this, and just to be clear, what I just asked about was the Trump policy from in his first term, but here's another one. Pregnancy resource centers, should they be able to receive federal funding through federal grants? That was the president's policy in his first term. Do you think, again, as a matter of federal rules, pregnancy resource centers ought to be eligible?
Again, the president's a pro-life president. He had a very pro-life record. He had an extensive debate within the campaign at his views, and I'm not going to get ahead of him in the budget process, but I think the country has a good sense of where he is on the issues.
Let me ask you just one more. The Mexico City policy, which I know you're familiar with, OIRA is very important in that policy. That's just the policy, for those keeping track at home, that says that American foreign aid dollars, tax money, shouldn't be spent on abortions overseas. President Trump championed this in his first term. Every Republican president has for decades now. Do you agree with the Mexico City policy, and would you implement it if the president directed you to?
Absolutely, we'll implement anything the president's asked me to direct.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vought. It's great to see you again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me break down what just happened here, because this is absolutely infuriating. Senator Hawley just exposed how McKinsey, one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, has been playing both sides of the fence in the most disgusting way possible. These people took over $850 million in contracts from our military in just 1 year. Let me repeat that $850 million of your tax dollars went to a company that was simultaneously working for Communist China. Think about this for a second. McKinsey had 90 prime contracts with the Department of Defense. They got $98 million from the Army, $132 million from the Air Force, $37 million from the Navy. They were advising on the F-35 fighter jet program, one of our most advanced military technologies. At the exact same time, they had 1,000 employees in China. They were doing business directly with the Chinese Communist Party, and they were advising Chinese state-owned enterprises that our own military has now blacklisted as threats to national security. This is a definition of treason in my book. How is it legal for a company to take hundreds of millions of American taxpayer dollars to work on our most sensitive military projects, while simultaneously helping our greatest enemy build up their military capabilities? This is exactly the kind of America-last thinking that has been destroying our country for decades. This is why we need people like Russell Vought back in the Office of Management and Budget. When Senator Hawley asked him directly if he would be an advocate for protecting American taxpayer dollars and making sure they don't go to entities that are essentially double dealing with our enemies, Vought gave the right answer. He said absolutely, and that he's excited to work with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy to get a handle on these regulations and make them better. But here's what really gets me fired up about this whole situation. This McKinsey scandal isn't just about one corrupt company. This represents a systemic problem with how our government operates. For decades, we've had this revolving door between government big corporations and foreign interests, where the same people who are supposed to be protecting America are the ones selling us out for profit. Senator Hawley brought up our experience during COVID, and this is such an important point. Remember when the pandemic hit, and we suddenly realized we couldn't even manufacture basic medical supplies in America? Our medical supply chains were so compromised that we were dependent on China for masks, ventilators, and basic pharmaceuticals. That's what happens when you prioritize global profits over American security and self-sufficiency. This is why the America First movement is so critical. We need to use government procurement to prioritize American-made goods and services, especially in industries vital to our national security. Every dollar we spend on foreign contractors is a dollar that could be going to American workers and American companies that actually have loyalty to this country. The conversation then shifted to some really important social issues, and I have to give credit to Senator Hawley for holding the line on conservative values. He asked about the Hyde Amendment, which has been bipartisan law for decades, stating that federal taxpayer dollars should not be used to fund abortions. The Biden administration has been essentially violating this law for years, and it's about time we had someone in there who will actually follow the law. Vought gave the right answer here, too. He said they will abide by all laws on the books. That's what we need. People who will actually follow the law instead of activists who think they can ignore laws they don't like. Hawley also asked about Title X family planning funding and whether it should include funding for abortion providers. This is common sense. Folks, if you're pro-life, which the vast majority of Americans are when you actually explain the issues honestly, then you shouldn't be forced to have your tax dollars fund organizations that perform abortions. The Mexico City policy came up as well, and this is huge. This policy says that American foreign aid dollars shouldn't be spent on abortions overseas. Every Republican president has supported this for decades because it's just common sense. Why should American taxpayers be funding abortions in other countries when we have so many problems to solve right here at home? What I really appreciate about this entire exchange is that it shows we finally have people who are willing to ask the tough questions and demand real answers. For too long, these confirmation hearings have been nothing but political theater where nominees give non-answers and everyone pretends like that's acceptable. Senator Hawley came prepared with specific facts and figures. He didn't just make vague accusations. He laid out exactly how much money McKinsey received, which specific contract they had, and how they were simultaneously working for China. That's the kind of preparation and attention to detail we need from our representatives. This hearing also demonstrates why elections have consequences. When we elect America First candidates, we get people who actually care about protecting American interests. When we elect establishment politicians, we get more of the same corruption and America Last policies that have been destroying our country. The bottom line is this. We cannot continue to allow American taxpayer dollars to flow to companies that are working against American interests. We cannot continue to prioritize global profits over American security. And we cannot continue to ignore the laws that protect innocent life just because some activists don't like them. This is why we need to keep fighting, patriots. This is why we need to stay engaged, keep voting, and keep holding our representatives accountable. The deep state and the establishment don't want us to pay attention to hearings like this because they know that when Americans see the truth, they get angry and they demand change. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Senator Hawley is doing the work that the American people elected him to do, and Russell Vought is giving the right answers about putting America first in our government policies. This is what winning looks like, and this is why we can't give up the fight. If this video opened your eyes to just how corrupt our system has become, make sure to hit that like button and share this with everyone you know. Subscribe to America First for more content that puts American interests first, and ring that notification bell so you never miss when we expose the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. Keep fighting, patriots. America's best days are ahead of us, but only if we stay engaged and keep demanding better from our government. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.